Hey guys, welcome to the Wild Bit Show. I'm Upamanyu,
And I'm Meghna.
and we have got a great show planned for you. Today is also a day where we have a guest, so definitely stick around till the end on till the second half definitely for our guests to arrive. But we also have quite a few interesting stories today. There is a story about the illegal lion trade that is sort of still thriving, and National Geographic has done a report on this. There is also a story from sort of the war efforts that is going on in Iran and how it's impacting one of the last populations of Asiatic cheetah there. Um, yeah, so we'll talk about those things. Meghna, what else?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about would you adopt a lab animal? We're talking about the ethical considerations that go into actually getting an animal into the lab and the releasing of the animal and the trauma that happens after that. Would you adopt one? We would also be talking about how uh, this oil slick from Iran. So this is also one of the war topics. How it is threatening protected wetlands. So the war has a lot of disastrous impact on the environment, as we know, but these are the bigger pictures. The conservation initiatives and the oil slick. We're also going to be talking about other topics such as uh, species that we discovered or species that have been rediscovered. So keep tuned in.
Right. Why don't we start with the illegal lion trade story? So this is a report from National Geographic, and this says inside the illegal lion trade. A new and alarming threat to lion populations is the growing demand for their body parts, including bones, skins, and teeth and claws. Previously, lions were primarily killed in retaliation for livestock predation or accidentally in snares set for bushmeat. However, wildlife veterinarians like João Almeida in Mozambique and conservationists across Africa are increasingly finding lion carcasses missing heads, paws, and bones. This targeted poaching for body parts, mirroring the devastating trade in tiger parts for traditional medicine, is emerging as a significant danger. While habitat loss and prey depletion have long impacted lion numbers, this new exploitation for their physical components poses a severe, escalating risk to the species' survival. And our discussion question here is, how can we curb or put a stop to this emerging trade of lion body parts? What are your thoughts, Meghna?
I think we have to go the strict way. Like, in India, in Kaziranga, they had like a shoot at sight order for poaching. So, like,
Hmm.
anyone who was caught illegally poaching or who was caught like trespassing, there was shoot at sight order. So, there were like really strict measures that were taken to actually increase the lion and rhino population in India. And I don't think there's any other way to do it. I understand that obviously for Africa, it is very different because it's huge and the areas cannot be manned as such. But I think if the population can be put to such forest department use, where there's like all the time patrolling and there's stricter punishments for poaching, then I think that might deter people because that is the only way you can save the lions.
Hmm. And I'll just share my screen for a picture, slightly a bit of content warning, but you can see this sort of a simulated crime scene. And so this is a mock-up lion carcass, and basically the forensics people or the veterinarians are you know learning or in a simulated environment, sort of gathering evidence and things like that. The other thing that surprises me about these kinds of stories, like illegal trade for animal parts, is always like how far um our interests or human interests go, like how far reaching and encroaching human interests are, in terms of that we want everything from almost every animal. Every part of every almost every animal is used for something or the other, maybe in traditional medicine, maybe for healing, maybe for you always tell a story about turtles and tortoises, I think, Meghna.
Turtles, yeah. So in India, like, I mean, I used to have a pet turtle, but it was actually illegal to have a pet turtle. But they used to
Mhm.
sell it in stores, and I was given a gift by a friend. And to be honest, I just thought that the turtle would live longer, so like I could just pass it on to generations, and he'll be there for like 100 years. So I said, okay, like if I'm getting a turtle, I'll just gift it. Might not be as painful. But then I realized that it was actually illegal, and it was illegal primarily. One, it was obviously protected species, but two, people were actually bringing the turtles, chopping them, and consuming them because they believed it cured asthma, so one of the breathing diseases, and that is why it became protected. So, in the name of medicine, in the name of something used as a cure, you actually go and exploit these animals that are supposed to be protected because they do not survive very well already in the wild. They have their own set of problems. Like here, the lion, they're saying that deforestation and habitat loss and climate change, all of these are causing problems. So there are already problems on these animals, and to bring them in, cut them down, and use those parts, it makes zero sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, encroachment for farming, for land use, other for energy projects and whatnot. There is already that demand that we are, or the pressure that we're putting on all sorts of animals, but especially this the apex predator species. I think we have talked in multiple episodes, about the role and the importance of apex predators, and
Yeah,
how you know ecosystems cannot function um, without. It doesn't seem like it from if you just look at it from a layperson's perspective, but if you remove the apex predators, all the other parts of the ecosystem would suffer tremendously, and suffer a higher risk of complete extinction if the apex predator gets eliminated.
that is
Um,
absolutely true. If you're gonna eliminate an apex predator, you're actually going to eliminate that entire environment where the apex predator lives, because that predator is what is controlling everything under it from overpopulation. So once anything below it gets overpopulated, then we're going to lose that environment essentially, because whatever it is surviving on, that would not multiply the same rate, and eventually either starvation or something else would be the cause of their death.
hmm. Um, this says also in the article, an appetite for lion amulets. Poachers go after elephants specifically for their tusks, and rhinos for their horns, but lions face multiple sources of demand for different parts of their body. Quote, that's one of the reasons it's been so hard to crack down, unquote, Almedia says. So I think lions' teeth, or their paws, nails, and things like that, that those might you know those are being used as amulets. Um, Most of the demand seems to be tied to Chinese or Vietnamese customers. Um,
As usual, usually with
as
everything that's exotic, it's Southeast
Yeah.
Asian. Yeah,
um, in Senegal and some other West African countries, for example, Muslims wear amulets crafted with small pieces of lion skin embroidered with Quran text for protection. So there is a lot of these kinds of usage. African traditional, cultural, medicinal, religious, or spiritual use also plays a role. Um, I think everywhere we evolved, like humans evolved, and humans evolved in Africa, of course, but everywhere we migrated to and settled down, we have figured out some sort of lore and myth around, using animal parts and using wearing animal parts. There used to be tribes who used to, the chief used to wear the lion's skin so as to get the power of the lion or things like that, right?
I don't know. I think there's a lot of things. I think it's also like a fashion statement sometimes. Like people have those
Mm,
tiger teeth or lion teeth, and they're like, oh, see, I have a lion tooth, I have a tiger tooth.
mm,
Sometimes it's just used for as simple as something like that. Sometimes it's just, I think, based in myth and the folk tales about how something helped. Maybe it helped in that era with some separate components that were used, but that time was different because you used to actually not exploit animals, like either you used to hunt down that animal and then use parts, but it was not like, okay, let's get these amount of lions, let's poach them and use them for this. It was not a wholesome purpose back then, but now we're actually just poaching these lions, like already all kind of animals, all wild animals are at some kind of risk. So it makes, like, right now you shouldn't be poaching them, you shouldn't be going for their parts. There are alternatives as well. Like you can go for other
mm.
medicines that would have the same effect.
Yeah, and now, I mean, again, it's not the best thing for the environment, but if you are to wear it as a fashion statement, they're far easier. 3D printing has become so ubiquitous, and you can work with a jeweler to carve something out of, some sort of precious metal or something like that. Um, I don't know. Strangely, maybe in I don't know there must be some tribal remedies there, here and there, floating around in India, but I think most of the sort of semi-urban and urbanized India has placed a lot of importance on sort of the precious gems and precious metals and those sorts of amulets, compared to, amulets made out of, l- you know predator or animal parts, for example.
I honestly don't know why. Maybe it's because it's been running through generations, or it's just one of those things that people used to do earlier, and we want to
Mm,
hold on to it. But it's something like how the Faroese grind is. I mean, it
mm,
has zero importance today. Probably when the grind happened, it happened because they had to feed people for whatever
mm,
reason it started. But these traditions that carry forward, even something as stupid as if a black cat crosses your path, you shouldn't be walking that path because it might be unlucky. All of these things,
mm,
we have no idea where they arise from, what the reason was for that to happen. But in today's generation and with what is available today, it doesn't add up that you would want to hunt down an animal for a fashion statement or for medicines or anything else, and that to a protected animal.
mm, mm. I think this article also mentions, in the closing segment, how to protect the lion. So raising awareness, they identify as one of the key steps in addressing this problem. There is a huge network of tourism operators in Africa. Of course, Africa is very big on tourism as well. All the national parks and protected areas. So they are calling on everyone who works with lions, basically tourism operators to park directors, to submit reports about lion poaching to local authorities and the African Lion Database, which sort of consolidates and standardizes critical data. And I think the other part is here, as it is said, that once a problem area is identified, close monitoring and protection in the field can make a real difference. So this is also key. Like, I think we have discussed in previous stories as well. A key element there is close monitoring and protection, which is not always possible, right? It's always you know um, it's largely the economic constraints, sort of the financial constraints, and sort of the manpower constraints as well, which can hamper the monitoring bit of things. But yeah, I think that is a focus area for these people as well.
Yeah, but I think honestly, the amount of money that tourism brings, and
Mm,
especially for like seeing lions and other, the other big five, the big four, I
mm,
think that amount itself should be like, oh my God, we need to protect this animal at any cost. So the whatever amount comes in from tourism, they have to at least spend a big chunk of it on protecting these lions. And once poachers know that the punishment is really severe, then there would be lesser people willing to become a poacher. So that punishment has to be harsher. It has to be one of those things that you cannot do this. Like it is not okay.
mm. And I think we have talked about, and there has been a lot of success stories across our country, India, as well, where these poachers have been successfully, um, you could, like, for lack of a better term, rehabilitated into being conservationists and tourism operators and things like that. And there are such similar stories in Africa as well. So I think that is also something the concerned authorities could potentially explore, making the incentive for tourism or protection greater than the incentive for poaching, which is really like easier said than done. But yeah, something they could potentially look at.
Yeah, I think a lot of things need to be done. And I hope Africa, you're listening, the governments are listening. I mean, this is on National Geographic, so obviously, like a huge population has read it. So you need to really like buck up and start taking those
Mm,
measures to save the lions. Um, like the African lions are only found in Africa and nowhere else. So if you're going to not protect them, then they're going to go extinct, just like the Asian cheetahs are almost extinct. I think they're
mm,
almost, yeah.
mm. Right. I think that's all we had to say about this topic. What are we covering next, Meghna?
We'll be covering the lab animals that we spoke
Mm,
in the starting. So it says, would you adopt a lab animal? Millions of animals, including dogs, cats, and rabbits, used in scientific research, are euthanized annually. However, some, particularly those from minimally invasive studies, breeder programs, or control groups, are given a second chance at life through adoption. Mallory Cormier's experience with Chickpea, a rabbit rescued from a lab, highlights the profound difference adoption can make, allowing animals to experience freedom and comfort they never knew. Similarly, the author adopted Hammy, a beagle who spent years in a research facility. While finding homes for these animals is rewarding, the process can be challenging as they often require special care to adjust to domestic life after their experiences in research settings. And if you guys know, there's actually like an adoption program in India with beagles. It's called Free Girls of India, and it is a program where the lab used beagles are freed and then they're up for adoption. They're obviously older beagles. They could be anywhere between 3 years to 10 years as well. And these beagles are given a second chance of life. Um, and for lab animals, the ethical consideration is kind of still very low, like what they need to pass. And with at least beagles and rabbits, I think the ethical considerations are higher. But for something like a mice or a rat, it's almost nil. Like you can just use them in almost any experiment and not feel bad for them. So these minimally invasive programs, where obviously they are, they're not in the best conditions because they're in control conditions for whatever study they're in, they're not treated as an animal. They're treated more as a commodity because they are used for the research. So they're a subject. But when you give them a second chance, you give these animals like a life, like to live as a pet. And I think that
mm.
that should be the norm for all these studies.
Yeah, I think the rabbits, one of the major industries that uses them is also sort of the makeup industry, and beauty products industry, I think, in general. Um, all sorts of creams and all sorts of other kinds of beauty products are tested on these animals. Sometimes lethally chemical things like medicines and things like that is routinely tested on animals as well. I think there is a like a change coming through there where ethical considerations are for animals, through the likes of PETA and other organizations like that advocating for these animals. You know, there is the ethical consideration is coming a lot more in the research done in recent times, but I think also the other thing is there might be like the article mentions there might be some um experiments that you know changes the animal in such a way which might make it harmful to for humans or to stay with any other animals. So that is another consideration, and there I think euthanization is the only thing that could be done.
I
um
don't think they're actually going to get those animals adopted. They only get
mm,
animals adopted which were used for minimally invasive studies or breeder programs or other kind of places. But having said that, what was the point that you had picked up just before this? The first point.
oh um
It's okay.
lost my
No,
train
because
of
I had a
thought.
point on that. Yeah, yeah, I had a point on that, and then I said, no, no, let me wait till he finishes. But I think one of the major concerns also is that when it comes to adoption, a lot of people are still not up for adoption. Talking about lab animals, in generally, adoption people are not okay with. People want to go and buy a dog or a pet or any kind of animal, and they do not understand the kind of torture that probably the moms of these babies go through, especially if it
Mm,
is an illegal breeder. So, in a lot of countries like India, there's not much regulation, and there are like these unethical breeders which keep meeting the mom again and again so that she can just give litters. And if you've ever seen the mom, she's in such a bad condition just because she's used commercially as a milking machine to just have babies and get these babies adopted. And a lot of times they don't have the knowledge of lineage and line, so they just adopt, like in like it can be like incestuous adoptation, what do you say, breeding or cross line breeding within the same line,
mm,
which causes genetic defects. So in India, like if you
mm,
see a lot of German shepherds and Labradors, they're sloping backs because they've been subject to inbreeding again and again and again. And now because of the sloping backs, they have disc problems and other problems, and they when you adopt them, you would be adopting them with a load of medical bills because they cannot be on soft floors, they cannot climb stairs. So this is all happening because of unethical breeding. So when you think about adopting or even getting an animal at your home, I think it's very important that you consider the ethical implications of your choice, because you might want a particular breed, but there are a lot of animals out there that really need a home. And these lab animals, they didn't ask to be put in a lab. They were put in a lab. So, you really need to open your heart out, be like, okay, even if they're older, I would help them settle. You're actually going to do more good adopting than ever by.
mm. Yeah, and the other thing is, the other thing there is that I think the I don't know if the adoption agency would look for, suitable homes in this instance for these animals, but I think
They do. Especially
okay.
like Eagles and all, they do like their checks and everything. So they don't just give
Mm,
up. There are also other ways of adopting, like, retired army dogs.
Mm.
So they've been in service and then they're up for adoption, but they're older, so they're around 10, but they're really, really, really obedient because they've been army dogs. So they're up for
Mm.
adoption. Um, but
Police
the
dogs as
problem,
well, similarly.
similarly, like, but the problem I think where it comes is people who have to adopt. Like there's a small percentage of people even now who are okay with adopting, and that too older dogs because when you're adopting a dog that's almost 9 or 10, you're going to spend only a couple of years with the dog,
Mm.
realistically speaking, because their lifetime is 13 to 14 years. A lot of people are not okay with that. A lot of people are not okay with bringing um, adult dogs in because they're like, oh, how will I connect with the dog? Will the dog ever have the same kind of affection, which would happen if I got a puppy? So all of
Mm.
those considerations come in with lab animals, but I honestly feel people need to be more open because these animals really need homes.
Mm. Um, my consideration there also was because you mentioned a line in the article. What I was thinking there in terms of checking the homes and
Lion,
things like that. No, sorry,
lion,
article.
acha,
Consideration.
lion. Oh, lion in the
Line,
article.
line,
Okay.
line. The line I was thinking of was also in terms of when I said, um, checking their homes as such and things like that, is also because these animals will come with a lot of mental trauma. So their new masters or whatever, the new parents need to have that, I don't know, mental bandwidth as well to deal with, or to deal, not to deal with, but to help them heal from that trauma. Especially with dogs, I think dogs carry a lot of trauma and they can be really, um, you know, it manifests a lot in their day-to-day life.
No, it does. It does. I mean, obviously, when you adopt an animal that is grown up, that comes from trauma. Even when you adopt an animal from a shelter, it has some kind of trauma because
Mm,
of how it was treated before that, before it was left in the shelter. What kind of problems it faced in the shelter because they just crowd a lot of dogs together in shelters. Depends which country, which shelter, but then there's the hierarchy of the dogs, and there's a lot of trauma there as well. When you bring these animals home, you have to be mentally prepared that these animals are not going to be the same way that when you bring a puppy without any trauma, that they would just be all happy and nice. You have to slowly ease them into life. So you
mm,
have to also adopt only if you're okay with bringing in such an animal. Otherwise, if you feel like you're not up for it, then it's better to not adopt such an animal because you're going to add to its trauma by trying to return it back or getting it readopted.
mm, mm, That's a really good point, I think. And yeah, I don't know if they would check for that. Um,
Would you adopt a
Honestly,
lab animal? Oops. Would you adopt a lab animal?
no, I don't think so. I don't know.
I knew
Um,
it. I knew it. We've had this conversation like a million times. And he's
no,
always
but
been
I
like,
am I
bro,
am opening up more to the idea of adoption, and I'm more sort of seeing, as obviously as I grow older, I am opening up more to the idea of adoption and seeing how it can be beneficial. Like certainly if it's an army dog or a police dog, I would definitely adopt that dog. I can say that without a question. Other animals, I haven't had much experience with other animals, so not sure, but definitely a well trained dog I would, yeah, definitely adopt. No questions.
oh, that's
um
nice to hear that you're changing because we used to have
no,
these
definitely,
long,
definitely.
long debates
I have seen this
years
change
back.
in myself over the last 3 or 4 years, where I have had some time to think as well, and I obviously, as you grow older, there's bound to be some changes in your thought process and things like that. But yeah, I think really good effort on the. I think this is the the sanctuaries and the projects and other things like that, who are working towards getting these animals adopted. I think Meghna mentioned a couple of projects in um, India as well.
Yeah.
So if you
But
are,
yeah, if
yeah,
you're open to adoption, you just have to reach out to like SPCA or any of the other places. You can just do a quick Google search, like, I want to adopt a dog or a rabbit or a cat, or I want to adopt lab animals in so and so country, and you would end
mm,
up with a lot of results there. But obviously, if you're
mm,
not going for lab animals, but in general adoption, then SPCA and other NGOs that run shelters, they would have a lot of animals up for adoption. So go
mm,
locally and try to adopt. Also open up your kind of like your vision or your exposure that it's okay to adopt, like I don't have to shop, I don't have to get a baby. I want to give an animal the chance to live a good life. I think that
yeah.
would actually help you to want to adopt.
Mm. And do you know, Meghna, if like I would believe that these adoption centers would have some sort of um, pamphlets or information on if you are the right person to adopt an animal like this, or adopt an animal in general, like with their they could need additional care or things like that.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, no. Generally, when someone comes to check at your home or do the regular checks and everything, it's like pretty much when you get a when you deliver a baby at the hospital, before you leave the
mm,
hospital, even though it's your own baby, they tell you all the
mm,
do's and don'ts. Like feed the baby this much and do this, do that, wash the baby after whatever and all of that. So there is always a do's and don'ts with everything. So even with
mm,
this, you would always have a do's and don'ts that's given by whoever is helping you adopt the
mm,
baby. There are like checks even after getting the baby adopted. So, baby in the sense is an animal, but yeah, so there are always checks later, and they will always be in touch. So if there's any kind of problem, then they can always get in touch and ask queries and doubts regarding that.
yeah. Um. Cool. I think that's a great
Yep.
message that Meghna sent out in terms of Google searching if you're looking for a new pet or a new animal in your home, to sort of go and check out the local adoption centers if you're open to adoption and up for a nice little challenge. Um, so, yeah, that's a great message to part this topic with. Um, Let me do a quick little story before we move on to the next bigger ones. So, a new mahogany species found in Zanzibar, but fewer than 30 trees remain. These kinds of discoveries, I can imagine the scientists who discovered it, what they might be feeling in their head. 30 trees remaining in this new species. A new species of mahogany, Afzelia corallina, has been discovered on Pemba Island, Zanzibar, growing in fossilized coral beds along narrow stretch of coastline. Botanists, so if you haven't made the connection already, mahogany is a type of hardwood tree. Um, uh, Growing botanists stumbled upon the trees named after their coral-like flowers during an expedition. Despite being in a frequently visited area, the species remained unknown until recently. With fewer than 30 individuals remaining, Abselia corallina is critically endangered. The trees are highly vulnerable. One was recently found felled by illegal loggers, of course. The trees are highly, sorry, loggers, with and two others were toppled by storms. Natural regeneration is primarily from root shoots, and few seeds have been found, though those collected show a high germination rate. The timber's desirability for furniture likely contributed to its scarcity. So, this is the first time it has been scientifically identified, but apparently humans knew about it you know, since a long time, because it is being logged and you know made furniture with.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's nice to see that they found even that there are only 30 remaining. So they were found before the last one died, which
Yes.
also happened even after
Which
the
also
extinction
happens. Yeah.
in
And it's
museum species. Sorry, yeah. So I think that's where they find. But yeah, I think. Oops, like you should I just do another small one and
yeah.
then we can do the big one.
Do it. Do it.
Okay, I think this is something that we had a little differing opinions, and also it was really, I don't know if it's funny, but uh, there's an exploring of the use of snakes and crocodiles in border rivers, BSF,
Mm.
stealth units. So the Border Security Force in India has directed its field units to meticulously explore the operational feasibility of strategically deploying reptiles such as snakes and crocodiles within vulnerable riverine stretches along the extensive Bangladesh border. This novel approach is intended to significantly bolster efforts in preventing illicit infiltration and curtailing various criminal activities. An internal BSF communication issued on March 26, 2026, explicitly states that these directives are a direct outcome of instructions from Home Minister Amit Shah. The BSF headquarters has tasked all its field units operating along the Bangladesh frontier to thoroughly examine the practical implications and operational effectiveness of utilizing these animals in specific riverine gaps. The mandate emphasizes a detailed assessment from an operational perspective to ascertain how these unconventional natural deterrents could enhance border security and disrupt illegal cross border movements, marking a unique potential strategy for enhancing vigilance. Um,
Mm.
One, okay. Two, I don't know if the army are scientists. Like, how would they know if the crocodiles and the snakes that they bring in this riverine stretch are actually going to survive? So until they have some kind of scientific backing or scientists telling them that it is okay to release these animals here because they fill a void, it is their niche, or it is their
Mm.
actual place of survival, they would actually not survive and it would backfire because you would be leading to the exploitation of a lot of animals. So
Yeah.
here, because it's the army and because it's the government, there's very little considerations that go into the ethical and the survivability. It is more about using these animals to make sure that there is no illegal immigrants coming into the country. So they're not really bothered about the animals so much. Obviously, if the animals thrive, it's a win-win situation because the animals get another area to thrive in, and there is a lot of deterrence for illegal immigrants. But
Mm.
I honestly do not know if the operational assessment by the army is enough to introduce these animals.
Correct. That is a good point. Actually, I agree with that. Yeah, I think as Meghna said, we found this. First, I didn't believe it. Like when we were scripting
Yes,
and
yes,
Meghna brought up the story, I did not believe that this could even be a story because
because it was
first
from
it
a
was a
newspaper. Yeah,
yeah, it was a local newspaper or a less heard of newspaper, and in my mind that translated to being less credible, and I just dismissed it, saying that it is a AI generated or sort of AI story. And then Migna found the source from a more reputable, in fact the most reputable news sources, and then I was like, okay, this is something that is really happening. So I think we have talked extensively in previous episodes as well about the harmful side effects of any sort of release. This might be a little bit more easier because they are being released in a very familiar and very similar environment, but still, as Meghna said, just an operational um,
assessment.
assessment might not be enough.
Yeah, I mean, if they are really serious about the animal surviving, they have to do like a scientific assessment as well. They have to bring scientists that are actually working on these specific animals, not like any scientist, because the scientists that work on crocodiles and snakes, they would also be different. The ones on crocodiles would be different, on snakes would be different, because researchers usually focus on one animal. Sometimes over the years
Mm.
they would focus on different animals, but they would have
Mm.
expertise on that one animal they've been researching. So they need to rope in those researchers that too from Northeast, from this particular place, to know if it is okay and if it is safe for the animals as well, what it would mean. So there are two ways. One, obviously the animals may not survive and they may perish, but the other problem that could happen is that they might have an explosion of a growth and they might go into different areas. The snakes and
Yeah.
alligators. That could also
Mm.
be a potential issue because there are
Mm.
villages on both sides of the border. So that all needs to be taken into consideration, and the only people who can actually give any opinion on that is not you, not me, not the army, not the government, but the scientists that are actually working on this animal.
Right, right. So we'll follow the story. Again, this seems something they're seriously considering. Consider, say, looking at the big names that are attached to this particular story. So we'll follow the story and see if there are any updates. And yeah, yeah, this is a whole new kind of artillery use. And yeah, um, yeah, we'll see
Yeah,
how this pans out.
try to come in my land. My crocodiles and snakes will bite you.
Yeah, it's like the moat concept, right? The kings
Kind of.
around there. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, they might be really desperate to come to this measure. Probably
oh
the illegal infiltration is something they've not been able to control in any other matter, especially in like remote places. So probably this is what they're resorting to.
yeah,
I can understand, but at the same time, I can't understand. So yeah.
yeah. Me neither. I was so baffled by the story. But anyway, speaking of war and illegal immigration and things like that, there is the story from Mongabe, which is about the war on Iran disrupts efforts to save the Asiatic cheetah, world's rarest big cat. The Asiatic cheetah, critically endangered with fewer than 30 individuals remaining, faces an uncertain future in Iran due to ongoing conflict. Once widespread, this subspecies now exists solely within Iran, where conservation efforts since 1959 have been hampered by political turmoil and international sanctions. Now, despite setbacks, recent rare good news included a sighting of a female with 5 cubs, a record number. The sighting brought the known wild population to 27. Oh my god, it's much worse than I imagined when I started reading the summary, with additional cheetahs in breeding programs and captivity. However, escalating regional conflict following coordinated strikes on Iran in February 2026 poses a new significant threat to survival of this big cat, teetering on the brink of extinction. Um, yeah, this is a this would be a really upsetting, because there has been a lot of work that has gone into, conservationists have been jailed in Iran for working on cheetah conservation, the Asiatic cheetah conservation.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone gets jailed there for anything that's not something that the government agrees with. And that is probably why there were already a lot of problems with the government and overthrowing the government. It's just that I think nobody imagined the overthrowing to be this ugly, like to turn
Mm,
into a full blown war. But in general, I think a lot of things that they were not okay with or they did not agree with in terms of what is allowed by the regime. They
mm,
used to be jailed for anything that the regime was not okay with. And I think one of that was the Asiatic cheetah. And for people who know, Asiatic cheetahs actually existed across Asia, even in India, but they were driven to extinction by hunting and other practices. And it's sad to know that there are only about 30
mm.
remaining. So their future is very bleak with the right now, obviously, there's a ceasefire on the war, but still going forward, we do not know what the future holds for these cheetahs.
And I think this is something we do not think about when we think about war. War is a very human construct. I mean, yeah, other animals, other non-human animals go at war as well, but this level of a war is a very human construct, and like decimating a human, you know, populations and human settlements also means that all the animals that are surrounding, and I think that is never taken into consideration in, for example, a war, planning room or war room, basically. um
Yeah.
yeah, it would
But I
be,
think
like
because
a amusing sight if somebody mentioned, oh, what are going to happen to those animals, and everyone would just laugh or dismiss them if somebody, said that
or
in a war room.
take them off the war discussions, because I
Exactly.
I think with most things that are very government based when it comes to economic development or mining or trawling or war, none of the environmental considerations come into picture. And this is
Hmm.
the same thing that's happening with the cheetahs here, because people who care for the cheetahs are obviously a small amount. People who care about the war, about fighting, about all of that is the government, and they have all the power. So these countries are obviously devastating. The war is devastating, and they're destroying a lot of things. So they're destroying a lot of, not not just the cheetahs, but there must be bigger areas of land, like how the other news that the oil slick is affecting, that we were talking about. Um, just like that oil slick news. So there's a lot more impact. And war is a very unnecessary thing, in my opinion. Like, I understand when it comes to that, you have to fight, but why does it have to come to that? Like, as humans, like, why do we have to bombard with missiles and ask for a $2 trillion budget and then keep firing and then say, like, oh, I'm more supreme. I have destroyed so many of their targets and they have destroyed so many of my targets. And I don't understand a lot of human concepts, and war is one of them.
No, I think war. A lot of people around the world is pretty much on the same page as you, is like on this topic of war, because I think war is largely unnecessary, but unfortunately, it has been a truth of the human civilization since the dawn of human civilization that, you know, war will happen. War is one of the things that is a constant, has been a constant. The methodology of war has changed, and some people postulated or hypothesized that, nuclear weapons, developing nuclear weapons would end, bring peace. That was some people's hypotheses back in the day when there was a nuclear race and things like that. And finally, when sort of America dropped the two nuclear bombs on Japan. Um, but that is simply not the truth, as we can see right now. There is active conflicts going on, at least in 10 to 12 regions. Massive
Yeah.
active conflicts going on. Some we hear about, some we don't hear about, but the people's lives are already miserable. With food and children and access to fresh water and things like that. But the animals, they can't, like, no media will cover them, and their lives are even more because they do not know what's happening, because yeah, they have no clue what has just hit them. So
Yeah,
yeah,
nobody's preparing the animals, telling them that a war is coming.
exactly,
So for them,
exactly.
the life is just going, and then there's like one big sound, and then they realize that there's something wrong. They're scared, but there is no one telling them what to do, where to go. And usually they actually anticipate a lot of big sounds, and like how in nature a lot of animals anticipate earthquakes and all, but this is not
Mm.
natural. So this is also difficult to anticipate. And we're talking about cheetahs, but it's not just the cheetahs. I'm sure that a lot of other animals are also facing a lot of distress in this situation, in the war situation. And it's not just the Iran war. There are wars, as Oops mentioned, in other regions as well. So every region is suffering wherever the war is going on.
Hmm. I think just showing you guys a couple of images here on the screen. Look at this beautiful swirling salt desert of Iran, which is one of the habitats of the Asiatic cheetah, and I think this is a beautiful species. There is a lot of efforts, as Meghna said, it used to be a very common sight in India as well, the Asiatic cheetah. And there has been a lot of efforts, bringing the cheetah from Africa. We have talked about that as well, but that's not really the species. It probably would fill the same niche, but it's not the same species. So losing a species would be pretty saddening. Where it is in our, because there are, as mentioned in this article as well, there are you know breeding programs for these cheetahs. So 27 in the wild, but there are breeding programs in zoos where this animal is being bred. So there is a hope for their future, because if they're breeding well in captivity, then that means these younglings could be released into the wild, and then bring that population back. Um,
But isn't it ironical of that we are the ones who drive them to extinction, and then we are the ones who then captively breed them to try to revive them? Um, why don't you just save them when they're there in the wild? Like, why do you have to plunder that and then be like, oh, let me try to find a solution? So, like, grow them in a lab or grow them in a small captive place, and then be like, okay, now go now, roam in the wild, and we'll be like, oh, we're the ones who saved the cheetah. So, yeah.
yeah, I think the answer to that is, um the two groups of people are different and mutually exclusive, basically.
True,
The
that is
people
also true.
killing and the people saving.
True, that is true.
So
And
that's
the
the
saving
reason
ones
why.
are this tiny. Saving ones are
Yeah,
this tiny, and the killing ones are this big. That kind of.
correct. The killing ones by default is everyone, because we are consuming the products and the services that are standing on the backbone of these wild spaces. But yeah, the saving ones are very, very small. Um, yeah, so there are a lot of these kinds of big cat species that are lesser known. There is this you know cheetah. There's the Persian leopard. There's the Amur leopard. The Siberian leopard. There's the Indochina Chinese tiger. There's the Indonesian tiger. All these, lesser known and very endangered species of big cats as well. There are a few good organizations working towards saving these every each and every species that I mentioned, but something like a war is beyond anybody's control, and even the best of conservationists has to bow down before the government taking these sweeping, life-threatening decisions for the entire nation and the entire landscape. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's a really tricky place to navigate.
true. And I think it's not just the cheetahs, like I spoke earlier. There's also other effects of the war. So we're going to get this one article in before our guest comes in. So an
Hmm.
oil slick from bombed Iranian ship threatens protected wetland. An oil slick from a bombed Iranian drone carrier, the Shahid Bagheri, is threatening the Hara Biosphere Reserve, a critical mangrove forest in the Persian Gulf. The ship, hit by a US warplane on March 6th, is leaking heavy fuel oil near the Strait of Hormuz, which we all know is the main pain point where Iran is holding the Strait of Hormuz closed, and they don't want any of the ships to pass through. And the US has been threatening because they want the pass to be open because 20% of the oil that is exported to other places is exported through the Strait of Hormuz. Satellite imagery shows the slip mixing with sediment and moving towards the protected wetlands, which is vital for migrating birds and endangered turtles. Due to ongoing conflict and bombardment in Iran, cleanup efforts have not yet begun. The Shahid Bagheri, a modified container ship with a significant fuel capacity, grounded in shallow waters, is exacerbating the environmental risk to coastal communities and the delicate ecosystem of the Hara forest. And so, just like the cheetahs here, the turtles and the birds might be at risk. And with oil slicks, as we all know, that the oil floats on top of the water, and when when it's on top, it gets toxic, and the oxygen that basically is being brought in, the that kind of reduces because there's no sunlight, there's no exposure. The film forms a layer where it becomes difficult for the oxygen underneath to be passed. So animals die because one of the toxicity, second because of oxygen starvation, and the oil can also get into like animals' lungs and other things. Things like birds and turtles actually thrive on the surface of these wetlands because they would be hunting there or they would come up for air. So this would actually be disastrous. And the sad fact is that because of the war, the cleanup efforts can also not take place, which means that these wetlands would definitely be affected. And even wetlands in general, like mangroves and mangrove species, they are the ones that save the coastal wetlands from like erosion, from like
Mm.
the sea's erosion. They kind of slow down the entire process of the sea. So
And the very biodiverse
everything,
areas as well, like mangroves and deltas,
yeah,
and wetlands, very biodiverse, very nutrient rich. So the ecosphere to really thrive out there as well. Yeah.
true. And the sad part is that with the war, not just this war, any war, this oil slick is a huge issue. Like the war also oil slick changes when there are some malfunctions with the ship, but in this case, it's because of the bombardment that it's causing this heavy flow, and because it's in shallow waters, it is going to affect. And the mangroves are going to be affected, the turtles, the birds, and obviously the humans are going to be affected because this coastal community depends on this biosphere reserve, the coastal communities that are living there. And the coastal communities are not the ones who are involved in the war or actively taking part in the war. They're just trying to survive. So their survival is also going to be at risk when they're not going to be able to fish or they're not going to be able to, um, you know, uh, get other things uh, from the sea for their survival.
That's again, we talked about two stories where the impacts are generally out of any individual's control, and which again is causing immense damage for the animals and the ecosystem. um cool.
Yeah. And hopefully there is the ceasefire turns into like a complete ceasefire, not like a temporary one, but a permanent one. And then the environmental activists and other people can go in and work towards protecting the species that they really care about.
Right. Yeah. Here's to hoping that. And on that note, our guest has arrived the in the room, and I'm just going to do a quick introduction, and then we will hear all about their research. So today we are joined by Dr. Vlad Demartsev, a behavioral ecologist at the University of Constance and the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior. He studies how social mammals communicate, which mostly means spending a lot of time in the desert pointing microphones at meerkats, hyraxes, ground squirrels, and other surprisingly chatty animals. His research explores the hidden structure of animal conversation: who calls, who answers, when, and why. The ultimate goal is to understand how animals live together, maintain their social relationships, and make decisions as a group. Hi and welcome to the Walbert Show, Vlad, and thank you for taking the time to join us. So, to begin, we
Hey, hello. Thanks for having
right,
me.
and
It's very
to
excited.
begin with, I think we always love to hear the journey of a researcher that has led them to their current research interests. So, what has been that journey for you?
F- Good question. Well, I guess for me, I mean, it's most. I loved animals since I was a kid. I was one of those children that kind of brings injured pigeons and sparrows home and drives his parents with those things. And kind of slowly I realized that there's actually a career that can be built around those things. And there was a moment when I wanted, hope to be a vet, but it didn't work out. And I was kind of spent a bit of time bouncing between different topics related to biology, but education, and that kind of stayed with me in the past probably 15 years, maybe more.
Hmm, that's really interesting. I
Okay.
think we have heard this theme of loving the animals and an innate love for nature and animals, a theme across all the researchers that we have spoken with thus far. So yeah, no, that's a really interesting journey there. Thank you for sharing that with us. um so your
We yeah,
Meghna.
go ahead. No, no. So we usually once after the journey we ask the question of if you could just explain your research on meerkats to our public, but you have to explain it in a way that like they are 5 years old. So like you have to really like make it very easy for the audience to understand what your research is about.
Yeah, so I'll try, I'll do my best. As basically, my work is trying to understand what animals say to each other when they are on a joint mission. When the whole group needs to go somewhere and they need to coordinate and arrange between themselves that when we're leaving, where we are going, and why, basically. And that's want to figure out. And of course, that doesn't relate specifically to meerkats. It relates to all social animals, including humans, of course, like how a group of any entities, any individuals manages to function together and kind of transmit the ideas and communicate the information that is needed for all of us to kind of keep going and keep doing the things that we're doing together.
That's great.
I hope
And
that answered the question.
yeah, no, I think that's a really good explanation of an introduction to the paper. Um, and I think your paper explores the idea of physical grooming and their relationships in sort of animal society. So physical grooming is a very well established thing in animal communities and societies, as far as I understand it. Um, what sort of initially prompted you to, and your paper looks at it from a very different lens. So, what initially prompted you to sort of look at vocalizations as that substitute for, or as an analog for physical grooming almost?
Yeah, so the idea that calls can substitute physical grooming, it's not mine, and it's also not new.
Mm-hmm.
This idea have been around for a while. It was mostly studied in primate species, as physical grooming is a very prominent topic in those with those species, with those systems.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea came from the very basic fact that grooming takes time. Physical grooming takes time. You need to approach every individual, you need to spend time with every individual in your group and groom. And time, this is something that wild animals don't have a lot to spare. And as the groups are becoming bigger, this limitation is getting stronger and stronger, harsher and harsher. And then the idea was that it's not about the action itself. It's not about coming and grooming physically. It's about like creating some sort of a bond and interact. Of course, can be done in multiple ways. And then communication, just exchanging calls, this reciprocal ping pong kind of thing. It seemed as a viable mechanism, as a system that could kind of alleviate this problem with having limited time and requiring physical contact. And this is, again, but this is something that was known and suggested well before my time. When we were looking at meerkats specifically, we noticed a very interesting behavior that they do in the morning when they emerge from their burrows, especially in the winter when it's quite cold in the Kalahari and where they live. And then they can spend up to an hour just standing on their hind legs, as kind of typical meerkat image that people have, being bipedal and standing up, and they warm up before they start their day, but they also call during that period. And they do it almost continuously throughout the whole hour, this kind of sunbathing or sunning period. And it was very unclear what's the function of these calls, because not a lot is happening. They're just there, they warm up, and there's no reason for them to exchange. There's no apparent information they're required to exchange in that moment. And it almost, when I looked at it for the first time, it always seemed to me like people coming to the office in the morning, and they have this very casual, well, hello, how are you? How are you doing? How was your day? And I mean, I've seen the guy just yesterday. There's not much change in their life. It's just kind of this polite chit chat to kind of say, okay, we're still good. We're friends. We're kind of, I still like you. We're still on good terms. And kind of this is, of course, it's very anthropomorphic image, but this is kind of the association that I had when I've seen that.
So
there's no, there aren't any important information being exchanged in those morning interactions. It's just saying,
the meerkat version of small talk, basically.
I think he just meant to say that is it the meerkat version of small talk, like the example that you gave? So when the meerkats are calling each other, is it like for small talk?
I mean, yeah. If we want to kind of take it fully into the human domain, I would say that that's the image that I had when I looked at those behaviors.
Sorry, I interrupted your thought. Continue what you were saying, please. Um,
No. I mean that's fine. I think that question about small talk was very much in place.
cool. And
And
you,
what exactly were the meerkats like calling out for? Like, because you talk about how dominant and subdominant species, how in the hierarchy, how they're responding to each other. If you could explain which meerkats actually call out to which meerkats and what the response is like.
So all of them will exchange those calls, regardless of their dominance or their social hierarchy. They all will produce these calls. Maybe the younger pups or the younger juvies will participate less, but that's understand to try and disentangle them and see what's the actual dynamics between those individuals. We've seen that, first of all, the subordinate individuals will respond very strongly to the economy is super strong. It's very clear who are the dominant individuals, who are subordinate individuals are, because the dominants are the only ones who reproduce in the group, and the other members are just kind of helpers that will support the rearing of the pups and kind of the general defense of the territory. So this distinction is very, very strong, very clear. And then the dominance will also further modulated. For example, if I'm subordinate and my relationship with this specific dominant individual is not very good, we have a relatively weak bond between the two of us, then I will tend to respond even stronger towards walls if I happen to hear the dominant calling. And these are the general patterns, kind of the strongest patterns that we've seen in this behavior.
I think we have some technical issues, but Vlad should be joining back. Technical issues is a very real thing. I had it just before the show as well. So yeah, the internet kind of connects us or disconnects us as well.
yeah. S- to bo-
Yeah. So okay. So I'm also in a remote place in India. We were struggling with getting the Wi-Fi on because there was no light. So I know when I feel for Vlad, and I think there's a lag. So we're asking him a question. There's like 5 seconds, and then yeah. So I think we should be having Vlad back anytime soon. But you have to bear with our um, break of how the internet is working. So yeah.
cool.
Hi
Is it?
Vlad.
Are
Can
we
you hear
audible
us?
to you, Vlad?
Hello.
Are we audible?
Hi.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
We had to do some technical things because your sort of voice was dropping in and out a little bit. So we brought you back in a different mode. So hopefully this is better for you. But so you spoke about sort of this idea of vocal grooming being a well established one. Has there been um, any um, any other species that had been experimented on like a non-primate species, except like what you did with meerkats, or has there been a lack of data from other non-primate species?
So for experiments, specific experiments, it's been a bit of a shortage. There are not a lot of studies looking at this topic overall. There was a relatively recent paper at looking at dolphins, and they showed quite similar results in dolphin exchange, vocal exchanges, when they've seen that they will exchange calls more readily with individuals who are their kind of secondary social links. They will engage more in physical contact with individuals who are they tightly bonded with, but exchange more calls with known individuals, but again, slightly further down in the social network. So this is something quite similar to what we see. Immediately recall, I think that was done observationally, not experimentally, these results, but it kind of mirrors quite well what we've seen in the meerkats. Other than that, other non-primate systems, I don't think there was any published work exploring that direction.
Okay. And you focused on sunning calls in your paper. Could you share with us what exactly sunning calls are?
I unfortunately can't mimic meerkat calls. I wish I could. But they are tonal calls. They're very simple acoustically. So there doesn't appear to be a lot of capacity for encoding information in the acoustics of the signal itself. They don't change, they don't stack into complex sequences. And this again kind of reinforces our understanding that it's not about the call, it's not about the information that's being transmitted. It's just the fact that we're doing something together. We're doing this, we're interacting, and what we're communicating, what we're saying is less important. And
Okay. So the so what are these calls like? Is it like a ritual? Is it like a form of submission? And do they? Why are they called sunning calls? Like, is it something to do with actually being in the sun or not?
exactly because of that, is just waiting until it gets warmer. They usually stand up with their bellies towards the sun. They kind of try to find the best lit spot, the warmest spot in the area, and warm up, and that's why we call them sunning calls. Just contextually, because that's what they do when they make them.
Hmm. Um, and you touched on, I think Meghna asked a question there, and you touched on sort of the hierarchy and sort of the forms the hierarchy in a meerkat sort of groups or society. Could you sort of explain how a meerkat society or
Can you
group
hear me,
is
guys?
structured?
We can hear you. We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's fine.
Yeah. I think there's just a lag of a few seconds lag. So when we speak, I think it's reaching to you a couple of seconds later.
Yeah, sure, not a problem.
Okay. Oops. Just continue with your question. Okay. So Vlad, you had kind of touched. Sorry. So you had
Sorry, I
kind
didn't
of
get
touched
that.
on the structure of how a meerkat group or a society works. But could you run us through what the hierarchy is in a meerkat society?
Yeah, sure. It kind of defines their whole social lives. They're this very steep and very um a very clear dichotomy between the dominants, which is the dominant pair, the male and the female, and they are the only ones in the group that will normally breed. Uh, Besides this dominant pair, the rest of the group, we consider them being subordinates or helpers. Some of them are related to the dominant pair because they're their offspring, several generations of those. And subordinates will normally not breed while are still in their group. They will support the pups of the dominants. They will provide them with food. They will them. They will support the general functionality of the group in terms of they will defend the territories. They will maintain the burrows. But it's quite rare. Normally, what happens, they either stay in the group for their whole lives without breeding, or they will try and disperse at some point, mostly the males. The younger males, when they kind of start, we call them rovers, they start leaving the group, going to those like with day 1 or 2 day journeys when they search the area and kind of probe neighboring groups if they can join or if they can find females that they can establish a new group with. And then again, this whole thing starts all over again. But within a group, the two dominant individuals are the ones who are kind of monopolizing breeding, and they also determine a lot of what's going on with the group on a day-to-day basis. For example, there was a study that showed, for example, dominant females have very strong influence about the direction of where the group will be going, or which burrow the group will come back in the evening. It's determined by the dominant female. So it's quite a big influence on the lives of the other individuals.
Okay. And are females under more pressure? Like how you said that dominant females actually decide. So are females under more pressure to regulate these vocalizations or regulate via these vocalizations? Or is there any other reason like evolutionary pressure or like how evolutionary ways that it has evolved in a way that that females um, drive this vocalization more than males? Is there like a reason for that?
I didn't quite get the question. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We can ask the question again. Which do you want to be asking it?
Yeah, no, I
The
can ask
last
the
question, I
question.
didn't get it about the
So
vocalizations.
you mentioned
I didn't get all the
mentioned the
details. Sorry.
hierarchy and the meerkat society, um, and your paper I think touches on females being, yeah, yeah. So your paper I think touches on females being under slightly more pressure to socially regulate via these vocalizations. Could you sort of expand on that, or if there is a difference between the two sexes in how they produce these vocalizations, or how often, or things like that?
We'll just have to wait. Okay. Vlad can go through the question.
Hello.
Can you hear us?
Vlad, could you hear the question?
No, still no. Can you repeat that?
Sure. Uh, uh, Basically, your paper talks about how females, and you've also spoken about this. You said how there's the females are under more pressure, or the females are more dominant and they decide. So, is this because of any specific evolutionary trait or something else that the females are more dominant than males? Like, why is there this sex difference where the females are more dominant? Meerkat.
Okay, I'm going to repeat the question just to make sure I understood and heard. Sorry. So the question was, is there something unique about the meerkats that the females are more dominant than the males?
Yes, and why is it so that in the meerkats the females are more dominant? Is it because of something that's evolutionary, or is there some other thing that's causing the females to be more dominant? Could you hear the last part that I asked you?
Everything dropped. Can you still hear me? Oh God, I'm sorry. I'm not sure which.
That's fine. Are you
Hello.
hello?
Yeah, can you hear us?
Vlad, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm not. Okay, so the question was, if is there something evolutionary about the females? Yeah, I will try to answer that. I think that the reproduction, this is something that driven that female influence and female dominance in that in the species, because they require the who is giving birth, the energetic requirements on the dominant females are the largest. Because of course they need to bear the pups and lactate the pups, and they do that often 2 to 3 times a year. So that's a lot of energy and requires a lot of food. So the dominant females were kind of forced to secure a priority in everything that is related to acquiring resources, and that's why I think this influence makes sense, also evolutionary, because the dominant female, the ones who are expending most energy, they have the highest stakes. They have the highest stakes, and then and they need to kind of assert their dominance and their influence on the rest of the group to make sure they receive enough food. They get to their foraging grounds. They get to the better burrows and the better dens that will allow them to rear the pups securely and efficiently. System might have evolved in that specific species, of course.
And in your research, has there been, or the study that you did, has there been any evidence that you found that sort of as the group size increases, this vocal exchanges also scales up as the sort of group size increases in meerkats? Oh, I think my um, microphone is not getting through to you for some reason.
Vlad, could you hear the question that Oops asked, or do you want me to
I
repeat?
didn't get that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think maybe Oops's voice is not getting through to you. I'll just repeat the question. It says that basically you talked about how physical grooming is not very effective because you have to go to one person after one person after one person. That vocalization came into play. Did you also find out that if the group size increases, these vocalizations also increase? Like, is it proportionate to the group size, the vocalization? Are you able to hear this question? Vlad, are we audible? We're not really sure if our voice is going through to Vlad. He has told us that his internet is usually better, but today it's giving a problem, and I think we're not sure.
Should I try and disabling my video? Maybe that will help the internet.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is our voice more clear now? Like, can you hear us? If you can't hear us, we could do this interview again another day, Vlad, when you have better internet. We're just trying to get through to Vlad. Technical difficulties. I think Oops and me, we're able to hear each other, but we're not able to hear Vlad, and he's not able to hear us. And because of that, we're not able to really ask the questions or get the answers. But we should try to get Vlad on another day when his internet is better. Um, I'm actually surprised my internet is running kind of okay. But yeah, uh, so we're going to probably take this interview to another day, right? Oops.
Yeah, I think that would be the best scenario there because yeah,
We have to wait for Vlad to join back, though, right? To just
um
or is
I I
how do we
think yeah.
how do we give
I'm
him
just
the
thinking.
message? How
Yeah,
do we give him the
so
message?
I
Maybe?
have asked Kingshuk to convey the message to him. I don't know what it is. Yeah, there wasn't really um isn't really any time to troubleshoot. But again, I think we got the main points through, and uh, yeah,
We
I
can
think
call. I mean, I think we can call Vlad again because even when we got the main points through, it was really breaking. So we couldn't really have the momentum that we would have in other interviews and asking questions or following up. Um, and by the time we repeated the question the third time, I think I had forgotten what we had answered before that. Because we were just trying to be like, okay. And it's one of those things, I think, when it lags, like you're like, hi, and then it's one, two, three, four, five, and from there it's like, hi. So by
yeah,
the time you
yeah,
would have
it
lost
is
the train of thought,
yeah, it was a double whammy where it was lagging as well as it was um
not
yeah,
functioning properly.
not
Yeah.
like internet connection was slow. So the internet connection was slow, plus it was lagging. So, both things
Where was Vlad
combined.
joining from? Where is Vlad joining
Um,
from?
Not sure, not exactly sure, but
Because then I would be like, wow, the internet in remote India is working better than wherever Vlad is joining from. But yeah, but we'll try to get Vlad back on another show so we can talk about his meerkat um, research because it's a very interesting research. It talks about
mm,
how meerkats talk with each other, especially during a social activity of sunning. We couldn't really get through all our questions. We couldn't ask everything, and I think even Vlad was having a lot of trouble trying to hear our questions and answer. So hopefully we can schedule him again for another episode. But for now, I think we can get back to our topic because we still have 20 minutes left. So, Oops, is there something in particular you want to cover, or should
um,
I cover something?
yeah, you can pick one if you have something you wanted to cover. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's an article. Obviously, it's not a very happy article, but it says mass drowning of chicks puts emperor penguins at risk of extinction. Emperor penguins are now officially at risk of extinction due to the climate crisis. The International Union for Conservation of Nature (IUCN) has added the species to its red list, citing mass drowning of chicks as a primary cause. Emperor penguins depend on stable sea ice, known as fast ice, for breeding and to protect their vulnerable young until they develop waterproof feathers. However, record low Antarctic sea levels, driven by global heating, have caused ice to break up prematurely. This results in entire colonies being lost, with chicks drowning or freezing to death. Researchers have witnessed catastrophic collapses at several breeding sites. Projections estimate a 50% decline in the emperor penguin population by 2080 if sea ice loss continues. The species has moved from near threatened to endangered in the latest IUCN assessment. And if you've seen the IUCN website anytime, then there are colors to notify the severity, and red means it's really bad. And we've actually spoken about this earlier, not just with the penguins, but with the krill and with other things, that the Antarctic and the Arctic ice poles are at a lot of pressure because of the global heating. The poles are the first ones to melt. And in this case, the penguins need the ice to actually breed and save and protect their young ones till they actually grow their waterproof feathers. If you've ever seen these chicks, the little chicks, they're brown in color, while the emperor penguins actually have these white bodies and black, um, what are these?
Coats,
Their arms? No. What are the
flippers.
arms of a penguin called? Yeah. The flippers, yes, so they're black flippers. So it takes time to develop because the babies are not born with those waterproof feathers. And which is why you see the fathers kind of keeping the babies in between their feet and just standing and protecting them till the moms go out and bring food for them. So it is
Yeah.
very important that these penguins that are at risk. I honestly don't know what really is the solution for it. I honestly don't know.
I think this is the anything to do with the ice and the poles. The solution is obviously has to be at a global level because if you know out of 100 countries, if even out of the 190 something countries that exist right now, if any one country is not following those regulations, that would be enough to drive the global temperatures to a level where it would be difficult um, to for the poles to exist or anything ice related to exist. And these are some of the species that have evolved for particularly those harsh winter Antarctic winters, basically.
Yes, and yeah, we have to just like I don't know. It's more of a waiting game, I think, to see that which species goes extinct at what time and when it's our turn
Mm,
finally. Because at this
yeah.
point of time, even if we unrealistically hope that all the countries are going to come together and somehow work towards global warming and climate change and all of this. It's not. It has to be something that's more faster, like COVID, where people just start dropping on the roads. That is the only time that the governments actually come together and they're like, okay, we need to do something big to save our species. But with something that this is like sugar, it's a slow poison. With slow
Mm,
poison, we just take it for granted, and we would rather do war, war, land, land. Don't enter here, don't go there. I'm going to shoot you, and all of that. And when it actually finally comes to us, we would regret not unifying as a species because everything would have disappeared by then. And it's going to
mm,
start from the poles. And in the South Pole is the penguins, in the North Pole, the polar bears are struggling with the loss of the ice. So animals everywhere are struggling with this. Yeah.
mm. Um, Yeah, no, I think this is one of those things that, like corals, like, these are events and phenomena at a global scale. So, there are these efforts around the COP 30 and things like that, to unify at a global scale and try and solve these problems. But I think individually we can impact this by creating the market for more sustainable goods by simply exercising our demand in the free market, in the trade market. um, that is, I think, the only thing we can do realistically.
Yeah. Um, we have to wait and watch. We have to see how our habits change. We have to see what chance these penguins have. But 50% by 2080 does sound very deep.
Yeah. um cool. I think I will do another bird species rediscovery, actually. This one is a report from Monga Bay, and this says once lost, now found. Five missing bird species rediscovered in 2025, offering hope. In 2025, birders achieved remarkable success by rediscovering five bird species that had been unobserved for at least a decade, as detailed in the latest Lost Birds List update. All these rediscovered species are native to islands in Southeast Asia and Oceania. Additionally, one species previously considered extinct and another reclassified as a subspecies were removed from the list. A particularly noteworthy rediscovery involved a bird last seen 94 years ago, documented earlier this year. The overall number of species on the lost list has decreased from 163 to 120 thanks to these findings. The Search for Lost Birds project, a collaboration of conservation organizations maintaining this list as an early warning system to identify species needing urgent conservation attention before they are potentially lost forever. Six more species are slated for addition to the list in 2026. On one hand, we have species that are being found, but on the other hand, um, you
We have
know,
species that are being lost.
correct. Such irony, such irony.
Yeah, but I think even the ones that are found are not really found in a very healthy state. They're more like, because they're found or rediscovered, which means that they were already really less to begin with, and they're just surprised that they're still there. So I think
Hmm.
it's one of those stories where we found 30 of them, or 40 of them, or 20 of them. And yeah, it doesn't really mean a lot, but it means that at least these things that we thought wouldn't survive are still surviving. So they show the strength and adaptability of these species.
Hmm. Yeah. I think very interesting here. I'll just share my screen share my screen quickly. Um, Very interesting map of the world here, where it is basically showing this is the search for lost birds, basically, and this is basically showing um, sort of the list of and sort of map pointing as well the list of all the birds that are currently on the list. So interestingly, in the South Island of New Zealand, there is this bird called South Island kokako, which is last documented 117 years ago. There is another subspecies of the kokako, the North Island kokako, which is still there, but the South Island kokako is possibly extinct. But there has been a thriving project in the South Island of New Zealand where people have been reporting, um, sightings as late as 2007 and 2009. So there is a group of people that are quite, I guess, very, yeah,
Active?
very, yeah, to find these birds. Very committed to find these birds. That's the word I was looking for. Um, yeah, so this is one, and then the other country. Um, so I'm just exploring the two countries that we belong to. Our home country, obviously India, and there is the Jerdon scosa that is it was last documented in very recent years, so 2004, 22 years ago. Um, so that is another species that is being searched for. And then there's the long-tailed bush warbler, which again is sort of northernmost parts of India in Kashmir, and this has been found. Um, after a span of 49 years. So yeah, I think there is Himalayan quail as well in sort of the northern India, which was last documented in 1876. Um, and the pink-headed duck. Oh yes, this is the not from northeast. You hear about lores when I have traveled to the northeast for photographing birds. You hear about lores about the pink-headed duck. This was cited last or documented last in 1923, 103 years ago. So very interesting website. I definitely, as a bird enthusiast, as you can sense, I'm very sort of excited to look at this map, but also at the same time it brings a you know um, sense of losing these species, and primarily because of our actions, right?
Yeah.
Mm. Cool. So I think that's all we had to say about that. And with that, I think we can start wrapping up the show as well. Meghna, you touched on sort of internet connections and remote India a bit. We see a new background that you have right now. Explain that to our audience, those who are watching us live or watching the recorded video.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if people really want to see, it's actually a really tiny village that doesn't even have proper roads. Um, I think a lot of people think most of India doesn't have proper roads, but that's not true. Most of India
Yeah.
does, and the remote places don't. And that is one of the reasons that that tourism is being affected in this region, and there are less people. So it's actually nice that there are lesser people, but it's really pretty. So, like, if I had to do like a short tour, I don't know if I
Mm.
would be able to. Uh, I would have to probably go around with the camera. I don't know if I can switch it around. Can I switch it around? I can switch it
Yes, you can.
around. Yeah, so you can see the snow mountains right from here. It's a nice sunny day, which it usually isn't because of the western disturbances and the climate change. So apparently, because of that, these clouds that you see, there's a lot of rain happening, which usually doesn't happen at this time. This is considered almost summer, and there are regions there as well. Even though it's remote, really pretty property. Building a small Airbnb there. Um, this is the remote place, really pretty, but internet-wise, probably not the best. But we got through today. At least
Yes,
it
I mean,
wasn't a call
surprisingly
off.
enough,
Yeah,
and I think your point around the remotest parts of India and the concept of digital first that the government has been pushing has really taken a lot of hold. I was very worried about today, as were you, and we actually got through and very very flawlessly,
yeah,
if I might say so.
yeah. I mean, if it was anything like Vlad's interview, I think we would have had to call it off. If I couldn't
Yes.
hear Oops and Oops couldn't hear me, I don't think we
Mm,
could have taken a lot of effort in trying to get through because we can't do much about internet connections. We can do a lot about human connections, but that is really not in our hands.
yeah. Cool. I think we can wrap up the show there. Do you have the message
Yeah,
for our audience?
of course. I think it is going to be mostly about the lab animals that we've spoken about earlier as well. Please consider adopting a lab animal. Don't look at them as just a commodity. Look at them as a life. Look at giving this animal a new lease of freedom, excitement, and belongingness. So you would be the family of this animal that really has suffered through experiments. So adopt, don't shop would be my message.
That's really beautiful and potent message. And as always, subscribe to our channel, and we are on all the major social media platforms. Follow us wherever you find most of your news from. We are on all the major ones, and we go live. Uh, you know. together, all together at all the different platforms. So you'll be able to catch us wherever you follow us. If you found this episode and the things discussed in it, though there were some technical difficulties this time, insightful, share it. Consider sharing it with someone who has similar views as to you, or with someone who does not have similar views to you, just to give them a different perspective. And if you're listening to a recorded version of this podcast, do consider leaving us a review. That really helps with the reach that we talked about. And if you have something to share with us, leave a comment and give this video a thumbs up. But other than that, that's it for today, and we will see you next Sunday, same time, same channel. Have a good one, guys.
Bye bye.